into relationships that begin to promise change for the community partner, for the perspectives of our students, for deepening and broadening our faculty members' ability to teach community-based learning courses and to engage in more publicly engaged scholarship. So, days of service to partnership. It's the principles of strong partnership plus an asset-based analysis of your own institution and your own institution's strengths. Our ability, particularly those of us in intermediary roles, to translate community need and wishes into the academic program, and a process and infrastructure for connecting community goals and needs to campus assets. You know, an asset-based analysis would look something like a review of your curriculum, or a review broadly of the variety of ways in which different segments of your campus are engaged in some kind of community outreach or community engagement, whether it's co-curricular, straight up volunteering, or curricular. The ability to translate community need and wishes to academic program really, I think it's a developed skill. The ability to understand what your community partner is asking for, and to think creatively about how your knowledge of your campus's assets can be tailored to help that community partner meet a need or advance their goals. But all of this requires at least some kind of process, if not infrastructure, for connecting community goals to your campus assets. And that all involves the ability to translate, going back to point 2. So part of what we're going to, I want you to try to listen to today is the examples from St. John's and Hobart and William Smith of where you can see a knowledge of the assets of their campus being brought to bear on the development of the partnerships that each of the case studies are going to offer you. And also pay attention to the language that indicates translation, and think about the overarching processes and infrastructure, as well as the sort of micro processes that have helped to develop the relationships with community partners, leveraging one day's service opportunities. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand the presentation over to my colleagues, Lynn Stravino and Anna Zach at St. John's University, to share with you their case study. All right, there you go.
Okay. Thank you, Lori. Thank you. Yeah, so we thought we'd start, and I have Anna here with me because she was really the hands-on, very much the hands-on, the logistics, the troubleshooter, the go-to person the day of. So that's something you always want to think about. Who is that person who will be here from 8 in the morning to 6 or 7 at night, just to be here and to be present. But we want to go over basically just a little bit about us here at St. John's, and then also how it all began. How did we begin with this partnership? So for those of you who are not familiar with St. John's, so we're Catholic, we're Vincentian, we're metropolitan, and we're now global. So really in every aspect and in every area, how are we connecting our service and the service that our students do? So we do have students who have co-curricular projects, part of their club or their athletic team, or just the fact that they're here and they want to serve. And then we do have the service that's connected to the curriculum. So that's academic service learning, and that's really first and foremost what we're dealing with here in the office. And then we do have those other campus ministry experiences and some special programs that include service as part of of their curriculum and their 4-year formation. So that would be our O&M scholars or our Catholic scholars. So just based on our mission, service is very important to us. It's the highlight and almost like the Stella program for St. John's. Part of our mission statement, it's part of our vision statement, it's one of our core values. So much so that in 2008, we started the Vincentian Institute for Social Action. And these are all the programs where it is really curricular service. So that's kind of like in a nutshell who we are at St. John's and why service is so important to us. So how do we move these forward? So very often we'll find that, community service sites will reach out to us. I'll get an email, we'll get a phone call, someone will see our webpage. In this case, it started basically, and one of the things I should say before I even move on, one of the things that we focus in on is the fact that we want our students to be familiar with service, why it's important to them, why it's part of their coursework, and really it's ingrained in these 4 years at St. John's, so that when they leave St. John's, they are not only well-educated and able to go out into the world, into their profession, but that they would take that Vincentian mission with them and continue to be socially responsible and civically engaged and want to continue to serve this, their communities in some capacity. So in this case, we had a former O&M scholar, and this is a program, it's, as I mentioned, a 4-year program where they have a requirement of 50 hours. It sort of each year builds upon one another. They have an independent study that ideally goes into like a senior capstone project. So the scholar left the university, graduated, and she started to work for Ronald McDonald House. And Ronald McDonald House at that point was looking to hold a fun run, which would be one of the biggest fundraisers for the year. So the scholar, Caitlin Conklin, suggested, why don't we hold it at St. John's? So she reached out to the associate director of the O&M Scholars Program, who she worked very closely with while she was here for 4 years. And with that, then we sort of collaborated in the office. That was brought to us, academic service learners, to say, what can we do? Can we do this? So from there, we went to student affairs. From there, we went to facilities. We tapped into the other areas of the university to say, hey, can we do this together? And everyone was like, absolutely, we're all on board. So we'll clear the field, and facilities got us the field. Student affairs would get all their clubs and all their organizations together. We, the Office of Academic Service Learning, will try to connect in some way possible faculty and students as part of their coursework. And that's pretty much how it all came to be. So clearly, starting with the need of the community, and Laura, you had pointed this out, how do you build relationships? You really have to listen to the organization. You have to find out what their need is, and then say, okay, how can we then as a university meet that need? So that's in a sense how it began. So the date was set aside. We were going to have it on April 16th. I remember it was my husband's birthday. That's why I remember the date. And that's where it went from there. And Anna's going to fill you in a little bit about the partner, Ronald McDonald House, which I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with them, but we can give you a little bit of an idea of why they were looking to do this specific fun run and walk.
So initially during the first meeting, I, together with the associate director of the O&M program, met with 2 representatives from the Ronald McDonald House, and we listened to them talk about their mission and where their organization is going and why this fun run is needed. So Ronald McDonald House, since 1978, provides a temporary home away from home for cancer patients, pediatric cancer patients and their families. They are located in New York City, right in the center of Manhattan, but they service families mostly from outside of the city, families that would have to commute here from far away to provide access to the 13 major hospitals that provide cancer treatments here in New York City. So they're not really providing anything for the New York City families. And that's where they decided, after talking with the board, to kind of make a change in their organization and to create family rooms within hospitals in New York City, where the New York City families could have the kind of possibility to stay in those rooms and relax while their children are getting treatment, wash their clothes, get something to eat, read a book, or even take a nap while they're waiting for their children. Maybe they live only 2 hours away, or maybe even half an hour away from the hospital, but running back and forth is much more tiring and doesn't allow them for that, instant communication with the medical team providing treatment for their child. So they decided that it's essential to kind of provide those rooms within hospitals in New York City to better service the families of New York City where they're located. So the first family home will be in the Kings County Hospital in Brooklyn. And to raise money for this new initiative, they decided to host one of their most successful fundraisers, which is the Fun Run and Walk, which they usually do in Central Park, in the outer boroughs. And that's how Caitlin Conklin got in touch with us, looking for a place to do this first outer borough fun run. And since she knew that St. John's is very committed to service, she thought that it would be the perfect place to host the fun run. And aligned with our mission, Conference Services decided to donate the space and the services needed that day, such as public safety and facilities. And our office, the Academic Service Learning Office, provided volunteers for that day. So we had 120 students who were volunteering either as part of their academic service learning responsibilities for their courses, or as part of a Greek organization or a sports team. So there were different capacities in which they were volunteering that day, but there were 120 St. John's students participating. So the fun run happened for the first time in the outer boroughs here in Queens on our campus on April 16th. And there were children of ages 14 to 17 from District 26 in Queens and from other private and Catholic schools that were invited. In the end, like I mentioned, we had many different departments from St. John's, such as facilities, public service, athletics, public safety, volunteering their services. The space was donated by the university to Ronald McDonald for that day. And we had 120 students volunteering in different capacities. From the outside community, we had about 166 children participating in the run from 21 schools out of the 26 in District 26. And they raised about $18,000 that day for the Ronald McDonald House in New York to help them in building those family rooms within hospitals. So during our initial meeting, I discussed the different needs that the organization had beyond that day, but also with the fun run. So they needed to reach out to local businesses, they needed to reach out to the schools. So obviously, I saw that immediately we could connect with our marketing classes and have them work on some kind of a project which would entail, creating marketing plans for that purpose. But also they needed bodies during that day. They needed our students to kind of run with the kids, to set them up, to register them, to provide snacks and entertainment during that day. So I tapped into our courses such as Discovering New York and Theology, Marketing, and Public Speaking that have required service hours as part of academic service learning. And their students signed up to volunteer that day in different capacities. Some of them set up the arena. Others made announcements for the runs, who is to line up where and how many meters they're running. Some registered the participants. Others handed out snacks. Others provided entertainment such as flying kites and face painting and other games on the side. So that was our basic academic service learning. And then we kind of moved towards project-based academic service learning, where we had sophomores and senior management classes in our Tobin School of Business working as a whole semester project providing a business plan for Ronald McDonald House. The management students focused more on just the fun run and how to market that to the community, how to tap into those local businesses, whereas the senior cohort took that a step farther and kind of gave them an overall management and plan for the next few years. And they recently got a new CEO of the organization, who is kind of thinking that in the long run, they're going to have to think about not only servicing families of pediatric cancer patients, but opening up to other diseases within the pediatric health field, because cancer treatments are becoming better and better, and there are less patients coming in for those long-term treatments. So our students help them refocus their mission and kind of provide that plan going forward. And then another course working with the Ronald McDonald House as a result of this partnership was the discipline-based academic service learning, where it was a marketing class, specifically copywriting class, where they developed content for marketing the fun run to the local schools, inviting them to participate, so writing copyright letters, landing pages for social media, landing pages for the website. They basically designed 17 unique portfolios of various marketing bits for the organization. And the students presented that at the end of the semester to the development director of Ronald McDonald House, and he walked away with 17 very unique marketing proposals and portfolios that he can use going forward in planning the next fun run that will happen this April, on April 29th. And then in the future, well, we have, like I mentioned, this April, we're going to have the fun run happening here on campus again. So we're working on organizing it and getting more involvement in terms of the athletics teams participating this time around and building on that. And recently, during the business students' presentations of the senior cohort, one of them suggested that they should have an app designed. So that sparked an idea, and we tapped into an IT professor in the College of Professional Studies, and he will possibly this semester move with this idea with his elective class on building apps, and possibly design an app for his students would possibly design an app for the Ronald McDonald House, either related to signing up volunteers or fundraising or any other aspect. They're thinking about their ideas, and we're trying to develop that. So you can see how one event snowballed into so many other projects with the same organization, and we're continuing to listen to their needs, and as the needs come up, matching them with the appropriate faculty who can then work with their students to help them with whatever needs they have.
And so I just wanted to add to that. So even from the beginning, Laura, you had mentioned, communication is really key. So I have to say, every semester, every couple of weeks, whatever, we're in touch with them. So we keep the lines of communication open with Ronald McDonald House as things come up. And we've all heard that old saying, right? It takes a village to raise a child. So it really takes a university community, I think, to meet the needs of every community partner. I'd love to say we're meeting all the needs through academic service learning. We're not. We're doing the best that we can. So you have to tap into all these other areas. So, when you use the university as a tool resource, it's then that we can meet all of the community partner needs. So any questions for us?
Excellent. Thanks, Lynn and Anna. I just want to make sure everybody knows I'm monitoring the chat bar. So if you have questions as you that come up during the presentations, please definitely chime in, and I'll relay them to the folks who are talking. Jeremy, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, sure. Just gonna pull up my screen here. Okay. Can everybody see my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you to the folks at St. John's and to Lori. And I will probably take 10 or 15 minutes up here. I'm going to talk about our tradition of one-time service days and how it's evolved since 1994. And then talk about some of the themes that Lori laid out in terms of moving from, trying to move from transactional to transformative. So we began, well, I guess I'll back up briefly. Lori kind of outlined some of this also, but I wanted to go over it too. So what are sort of the advantages and disadvantages of one-time service days? If you've done a lot of these before, these will probably be pretty familiar to you. But I think advantages are that it gets students out of the bubble of the campus. It's pretty easy for, at least in our small campus, for students to pretty much get everything they need right on campus. They rarely have to go off campus if they don't want to. So this helps get them off campus. It's a shared experience with many fellow students, which may not happen also if you get kind of caught in your little clique or you're having trouble connecting with students. It's a way to meet a bunch of new people. It's a statement of institutional values. I think that that can be, you know, it depends on your institution how much those values are really backed up. And here we have great support, but it's a statement of institutional values, you know, an ethos of service and citizenship. And it can be sort of a gateway to deeper service experiences. I sort of look at it like a, you know, like a spectrum or a continuum, and you can maybe start off with some of these one-time opportunities and it gets you curious and you might want to get involved with a longer term opportunity. And then maybe you start thinking about some bigger questions of, you know, what is the public good and how can we deal with social justice issues in our society. So what are some of the disadvantages? As we've said, it can be quite episodic and it can only be transactional. I will not lie, there have been times where we've sent students to, you know, wash windows for maybe the second time that academic year, which is, you know, frustrating, but sometimes that's what community partners also need. Or say that they're needing. So sometimes it's make work projects. These are often outdoor projects, and because they're so time limited, it's you know, it's hard to really have students get to know an organization and get deep into a project. I often get asked, can you bring from 5 different sites? Can you bring 20 shovels? And you know, we don't have 100 shovels on hand, so. You know, we have some tools that we bought in a store in our basement, but so we try to provide that where it's really needed. But we're also trying to help the community understand that we don't have a whole home store that we have access to. Reflection can be limited on these experiences, and then we start to get into those questions of what are the long-term impacts. So to be more specific, in terms of our community, this began in 1994 as a student-led initiative. It became a club called Day of Service. It was a huge service day. The students planned, there still is to this day a committee of students, but in the 90s they would plan for the entire academic year this one day, and they would have hundreds and hundreds of students and well over 20 sites, and it was a huge initiative. And so from there, in the late 90s, when President Guerin came, and President Guerin used to run the Peace Corps and has been involved with Corporation for National and Community Service. He was the board chair. So we've been very blessed to have him for 18 years now, although he is sadly leaving sooner than I would like. And he said, well, I'd like to talk about having all of our first year students as part of orientation do complete a service project. So since then, we've done that, and it has grown and changed in certain ways since then, but we've stayed true to that. So every first year student must participate in that one-time service day. After that, it's pretty much everything on our campus is voluntary. I mean, you know, if you choose to enroll in a service learning class, for example, then you would maybe have to do service there, but we try to make, again, that sort of statement of values. So moving forward, in 2008, a couple years before I arrived here, the student club said, well, we can do something in the fall semester as well. So they decided to shift away from just an April event and starting in 2008, we've done something in October, a smaller day of service in January for MLK Day, and then the traditional April Day of Service. In 2009, the 9/11 Day of Service became a national effort, and we participate in that, but it's more of a remembrance than it is, let's send 100 students out here and there, because it's usually during classes, and our days of service are usually, our other days of service, not 9/11, are usually on the weekend or on a Saturday. And then in 2014, we had our 20th anniversary. We brought some folks back who had started it in '94, and that was a great celebration. So right now, technically, we do have 5 days of service, August through, starting with the academic year in the beginning of August. Well, the end of August, you know what I mean? The beginning of the academic year, which starts in the end of August, all the way through April. But September and January are a little bit smaller. September is, again, more of that remembrance event. And in January, we've shifted our academic calendar, so now we are in session when the national holiday happens, which is great. So we can celebrate that. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that has evolved in a second. But to give you a sense of scope, we have an enrollment of 2,200 students. And in October and April, it's usually about 15 to 20 sites, maybe 200 to 250 volunteers. MLK Day is small, it's probably 40 or so. And then in August, it's the whole first year class. So that's 700 usually, which is, that's a lot of fun to plan, let me tell you. So how do we sort of build continuity? What we've done, I kind of talked about the multiple days. We try really hard to communicate that with our partners. So when I'm soliciting sites for the August first year day of service, I'll send out a letter in June and say, hey, we'd love to partner with you for day of service in August. And by the way, here are the subsequent dates for the rest of the year. So you can kind of plan out your calendar if you have other needs. So we try to let them know in advance. Another thing that's been really helpful is the city of Geneva, which is a small city of 13,000. About 6 or 7 years ago, they reorganized the city into neighborhoods, 11 different neighborhoods, and they've built up volunteer leadership within those neighborhoods to form neighborhood associations. And many of those neighborhood associations have become stronger and have gotten familiar with our day of service program and are starting to think ahead of how we can work with them. We've tried also at times to integrate this into coursework. So one thing that we've started, I think this is our 3rd year, we started a learning community for sustainability. And I've tried to work with them in a couple of ways. One way is during the August and October day of service, we've tried to find sites for them that work with, say the Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge, where they can go and learn about different bird habitat or native plant species, and also be giving back and helping out the staff there. Another thing that's been successful is we have a couple of professors who teach a senior sociology seminar, and a lot of that work, that project work that our seniors do, they'll sort of do mini community-based research projects within their social seminar, and they'll produce a report and have some ideas. And a couple of those ideas have gone on to become larger community projects that we can then come back 6 or 12 months later and provide volunteers through day of service. So that doesn't happen with every site, but when it does happen, it's a really nice connection. And then at the bottom here, it's just sort of the power of an idea projects. That's a President Guerin phrase, and I'll give a couple of examples of that. So I talked about the city of Geneva. You can see the map there and the different shadings for the neighborhood associations. So we have worked on projects with the vast majority of these. Some of these neighborhood associations are more active than others, but we have, I would say, pretty strong relationships with probably half of these neighborhood associations, and we're happy to work with anybody else that wants to play in our sandbox as well. And just another note about this, a lot of these, not all, but many of these logos were designed with our students in our art and architecture department. So they, like the folks at St. John's were talking about, promotional materials and the ways service learning can contribute to that. So this was I think a similar example. Several of these logos, which I think are really nice, I wish I was that artistic, are somewhat, there's community input. It wasn't just like a top-down, here's your logo, but the students designed something and they presented some options to the community members and they had a discussion and sort of voted on it. So some of these power of an idea, bigger projects. I know this picture's a little pixelated and I'm sorry about that, but this is one of our projects from the Orientation Day of Service. And for 3 years now, we've worked with a nonprofit called Stop Hunger Now. They come to our campus and about, I'd say a quarter to a third of our first year class, so usually about 200 or more, will meet at our field house on campus, and they'll set up whole rows of tables and they will measure out, rice, dried vegetables, vitamin packets, and things like that. And they'll vacuum seal all the dried food product and pack it. And so it's a way for this organization to get college students involved in thinking about a global issue that's very important. And it also helps them just package a whole bunch of food quite efficiently and quickly. So we've done this for 3 years in a row now. And the reason I like that is because we've been able to sustain it. It's not just like, oh, here, let's run over here and do, food this year, and next year we'll do something different. So I'm grateful that institution has been willing to support this, because it does take a little bit of funding to bring these folks in, and they have to cover their costs and the costs of the food product and things like that. So that's well over 600 students now over the course of the past 3 years that have participated in this kind of project. So we often talk on our campus about the connection from local to global. So this is another way that we are trying to embody those values for our students and have them contribute in a meaningful way. Another big idea that I spent a lot of time on about 3 or 4 years ago now was through the Kaboom organization, another nonprofit. Daryl Hammond is a pretty dynamic guy. He came to our campus and spoke, and we had all the first year students in that class read his book about how he got into community building and designing of playgrounds. And so I got a picture here of us putting together the big playground, but we actually helped organize and fund 3 different play spaces across Geneva. One was at our Boys and Girls Club and Community Center. One was for an age-appropriate, smaller playground for Head Start children at our elementary school. Because you wouldn't believe how many regulations. I mean, I understand it's for safety. I totally support that. We want kids to be safe when they play and not get hurt. But it's so, it can be quite strict about how these things are constructed and what's safe and what's not. So at one of our elementary schools, they had, an age-appropriate playground for 5 through 9-year-olds or whatever, but there was nothing for the 3 and 4-year-olds who were in Head Start at the same building. So we helped put that project together. But this one was down by our lakefront, which is our public park right by Seneca Lake, which is beautiful. And we found sort of a triangle of land that really had was like big enough for a playground, a nice playground, but wasn't big enough for anything else. And we worked with the community to design this, get input on what types of play equipment that children wanted. Like we went into the 2 elementary schools and talked to the children about it, did a lot of fundraising, and over the course of probably a year and a half, that whole process, we got the community involved in addition to the campus, and we built 1 big playground, 1 small playground, and helped renovate another play area at the community center. So we had a lot of students that were involved on days of service and then other events throughout the course of that time. And that was a great project. What else? So for the MLK Day of Service last year, MLK Day is tough because it's January, so it's tough to find like service projects. We don't want kids, chopping 2 inches thick ice off the sidewalks in 10-degree weather in upstate New York. So one thing we tried last year was we had 3 or 4 sites for a smaller cohort of volunteers, but we cut it a little short. We said we're going to do about, typically it's like 3 hours for a service project. We said we're going to go about 90 minutes to 2 hours. We're going to bring the volunteers back, warm them up, and then we have a social justice theater company on campus of our students who work with a theater professor, is a close friend of mine, and her company is called Mosaic New York. And so we had the students come back after the service, get warmed up, and then they watched a performance that the theater company gave, and then had a conversation about race in America and inclusion and what the legacy of Dr. King is today. And so that was a difficult conversation, but I think it was meaningful, and I really appreciated it. And then this year we're going to do something somewhat similar. We're actually just going to have one site for all the volunteers, and we're going to link up with the community's annual celebration, MLK celebration that they do. So they do a march every year, and then they have a memorial and remembrance event / service, and then there's a meal it's open to the community. This year it's going to be at the Presbyterian Church, and it's interfaith. It's not like you have to be Christian to go to this, right? So it's for people of all faiths or no faith if they're interested in remembering Dr. King's life. So what we're going to do is we're going to have all the students that register go to the church early, help set up, help cook the meal, serve the meal, and then eat with whoever is there, the community members that are there, and engage in conversation and just get to know people in the community. So I'm excited about this. I like that everybody's going to be together, and it's a new thing we're trying out. So I hope that it goes well. But I'm excited about this kind of model for MLK Day. And then I think the last sort of project that I want to highlight here is called Tools for Social Change. And I could spend about an hour talking about this, but I won't, because Lori will just cut me off. But this actually has a pretty strong connection to our Day of Service, our one-time service day initiative. One of the gentlemen in the front row there, Reverend Golden, we had worked with his church, Mount Olive Church, over the course of a couple of years, helping them build a community garden and assemble a shed to store tools and a wheelbarrow and so on and so forth for the community garden. And so I had built a good relationship with him. I mean, there were other people that knew him. It wasn't just me. But so when a friend of mine who's in the education department and I kind of had this idea about what if we did some kind of race dialogue service learning project that could connect to community building and community action. We said, well, where are we going to do this? How are we going to make this happen to get students connected to community members and not just have it be students talking to students? And so I said, well, why don't we ask Reverend Golden if we can meet at his church? And I think, again, not that it's all me, but it helps that we've built, trust with some of these community partners. And so when I went to Donald and said, hey, we had this kind of weird idea, would you be interested in hosting, and would you be willing to put an invite out to your congregation and the people that live nearby the church and invite them to come? And he said, yeah, he was all about it. So that started in February of 2015, and we've met almost every week since then. And I could tell you all the stuff that's happened with that another time. But that, I really think that having that connection through the one-time service day made this much more viable. Because, this is located in the most economically distressed part of Geneva, one of the most overlooked parts of Geneva at times. And, the perception of the small private wealthy college, semi-wealthy college coming in and trying to fix things. There's a trust issue there. And many of us who are going to come and participate were, this is a Black church and most of us were white. And so again, the fact that he was willing to trust us and move forward with that, I think is meaningful. So my takeaways, building relationships and trust is very, very important. Ask your community partners for feedback, whether that's informally, whether you have a little survey, however that is, make sure you're asking them for feedback and how you can improve. And it might, if you're lucky, be some laying groundwork for more ambitious engagement or change-making opportunities. Kind of talked about coursework and service learning before. And then, if possible, integrating one-time service days with broader goals. Like we've had a couple of smaller projects around voter registration or school supply drives and opportunities for those kids that are struggling to get simple school supplies, to have access to those. I think voluntary is better than mandatory. I think that the one-time service opportunity during orientation, which is mandatory, is good. I think it's a great statement of values as a first-year student is entering your institution. But I think after that, it's better to go more voluntary than anything else. We noticed that just there's much more enthusiasm when you have it with voluntary volunteers, that is, and it's people who really want to be there. And then, if possible, serve alongside community members. So one of the things that's been great about working with those neighborhoods is that we've begun to get our students out and working alongside community members instead of, send 10 students to the Salvation Army where they meet the executive director and the executive director says, here, you can wash these windows and mop this floor. Which is, if that's what's needed, cool. I do support that. But having students meet and have conversations with community members, I think is really, really meaningful. So I think that's all I got. Thank you, Lori.
Excellent. Thanks. Thanks to all three of you. I'm still monitoring the chat bar. So anybody who has questions, please feel free to type them in and we'll answer them. In the meantime, I'm going to take the last few minutes that we have to just engage all of our presenters in some conversation. But by way of saying, I think what captivated me about these case studies, right, is you can see how the one-time service opportunities that may be a mandate, say for your first year, the folks who are on this call, right, your first year students, it doesn't just have to be a one and done thing and then it's something that you either look forward to or dread the following year, that it can be part of the foundations for building relationships with organizations and people who you can do deeper, more meaningful work with. I think the one thing I wanted to highlight from the St. John's example, which I thought was innovative, but and surprising, but it shouldn't be surprising, is that the one-day service opportunity was less about students going off campus, and in Queens, they can figure out New York City, right? But it was about inviting the community onto campus, and having neighborhood kids as well as others, sort of experience the campus environment. So I think that these one-day service opportunities really can be leveraged to build a whole bunch of different relationships and to do more than just the task list, right, that we've been given. So so I wanted to ask my fellow presenters here, if in listening to you, sort of going through thinking about what I asked you to think about, right, and putting your presentations together, and then and then listening to each other, what stands out for each of the three of you in terms of maybe innovative or creative ways to really leverage the one-day service opportunities? Please just unmute and talk.
So I think, you know, for us, it goes back to that conversation again. And I think the more that you speak to the community partner, the more you can put that puzzle together. So sort of like putting the puzzle together, like in what ways can we, you know, connect whomever here at the university. And at the same time, Lori, to that point, this one day was asking the community to come in. So District 26 schools coming in and tapping into that. But again, that came up from Ronald McDonald House.
Yeah.
That was their suggestion. They wanted to tap into those, you know, into those schools. But it's really keeping the lines of communication really open, and then sitting down and saying, okay, what can we do? And we're kind of the people, you know, that can do it, that would really like connect. Let's get this class involved because they have this need. Let's get this class involved. Let's get this organization involved. And let's see, you know, what other ways that we can do it. So that kind of came across also, you know, with Jeremy, like really listening to the community partner and to the needs, and then making the connection, rather than kind of swooping in like, here's our menu and this is what we can do for you. But let's hear about who you are and what your need is.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think I can do. I think I should do more of this. Reminding me, I need to do more of this. But I think it's just being real with your community partners, being like, look, if you could have anything, like if there's anything we could do, we'll get back to the constraints later. But like, what do you really need? What would you really, really want to have happen? And if we can't do it for a one-time service day, maybe I know of some other way we can try to work on this.
Yep. Well, and for me, that goes back to the conversation I tried to interject with an asset-based analysis of your campus, right? So for example, I mean, I know both of your institutions, okay. You know, somebody comes to, a partner comes to both of you and says, boy, we really could use a housing study and then, you know, the development of housing policy for our particular neighborhoods. My guess is that's probably not the first thing you would think of as your institution as having, you know, like spot on resources to be able to address that need. And so understanding our institutions, what they really can and cannot deliver, makes a huge difference, because often, you know, community folks will come. I mean, like I said before, institutions they loom large, right, in our physical environments. And it's easy just to assume that there's all kinds of endowment revenues that can be shared broadly. And that's, you know, it helps to be able to educate the community folks about what you can and cannot do, right?
Right. And I think managing expectations also with the community partner. You know, we can do what we can do, but, you know, being realistic about it, like you're not over promising and under delivering for sure, you know, and just really like laying out what is possible. And sometimes it's going to take time. I mean, sometimes you just cannot connect the right course, or the organization that you wanted to tap into cannot help them at this point. So it's really managing their expectations. And also to the point, and I don't know whose presentation it was part of, but also evaluating. So we send out an evaluation to our community partners every semester.
Yes.
We really do want to hear from them what worked, what didn't work.
And
we want to have a time where we can actually, you know, directly speak to them. And we also set aside one time during the academic year to have maybe 5 or 6 community partners come in, about their organization, their mission, their needs, who they are, where they're located, and we'll invite faculty in so that faculty can start connecting the dots in a sense.
Yep.
For us, like our academic service learning program, it's faculty driven. So a lot of the times, you know, it's finding the right faculty to pick up the project after listening to the needs of the community partner. And, you know, so it either the idea comes from the community partner, and then we look for the right faculty, or the faculty has an idea, and then I reach out to community partners who needs the video and who needs, you know, whatever the faculty can provide with their students. So it's both ways, and just evaluating, like, so we're not creating busy work, we're just doing something that they really need.
Good. You know, for the last couple of minutes we have here, there's a couple of comments in the chat box. Dan Dankert from Western Illinois said he was interested in sort of getting a decent amount of information on creating partnerships with local organizations. Catherine Whitworth from Western Virginia said, WVU, was interested in the notion of meeting community needs but not forcing service on them. Could both of you sort of talk to the issue of maybe mandated service days and how you know, strategies for approaching the development of community partnerships?
So maybe for the mandated, so we do have, Jeremy, as you had mentioned, I guess with your first year students, we have about 3,000 incoming freshmen, and there is a mandatory component in the Discover New York class.
Wow.
So half of the students take it in the spring, half will take it in the fall. And every teacher, every professor who teaches DNY, Discover New York, has to include a service learning component, and it has to tie to the learning objectives of the class. So if I'm teaching about New York through immigration issues, then we're going to look for some sort of immigration site. If I'm teaching through the poverty and the hungerness in New York, then it'll be the soup kitchens of food, food pantries. So in those cases, we have a database of about 80, all total about 100 community service sites that we work with. That's including our global. So in the New York metropolitan area, about 80. That takes a lot of conversations and a lot of communication, and setting up the expectations. These are Discover New York students. They're coming in for 6 hours typically to have like 2 or 3 experiences. So again, it comes back to managing those expectations and having sort of that database of our partners who are there for us all the time.
And what we do to maintain those relationships, we do check-ins with the partner organizations each semester. So we'll have our graduate assistants and student workers call in and, you know, go through a script where they check if all the information we have is relevant, if they still have the same needs, if anything has changed on their side, if there are any complaints. And that's aside from the survey that we send them electronically at the end of each semester. So we do a lot of, you know, communication, a lot of checking in, making sure that everything is working. And then again, re-emphasizing the fact that it is a faculty-driven program. So sometimes you may have 100 students come in during a semester, and at times you may have no one come in because your organization hasn't been matched up to a particular course this semester. So managing those expectations as well.
Great. Jeremy, you have anything to add for the good of the order before we conclude?
Sure. Just briefly on the mandated service. I'm just grateful that our institution has been able to support the Stop Hunger Now the last 3 years. Between that and the Sustainable Living Learning Community, that is about 300 students that I'm set. Like, I know what they're going to do. Because when it was like 750 people and I didn't have that support to bring in that kind of organization, or hadn't yet identified that larger project with the National Wildlife Refuge, it's like 45 sites. It's like 3 people here, 9 people there. And it really does hurt the quality. It is a lot of these like make work things and the logistics of it. After a while, you're like, is this a good use of time? You know? So if you have institutional support, if there's some way you can find, you know, we haven't, for instance, I haven't used this for first year orientation, I haven't had to, but we have sometimes you'll find like these endowed funds, you know, through a department or through some initiative that can relate to peace building or dialogue or service or something. And yeah, you want to submit a substantive proposal. I'm not saying it's just say anything to get the money, but if you can find even a few $1,000s to support a bigger initiative that engages many students but still has a good outcome, it helps.
Cool. Well, thank you. It was really a pleasure to get all three of you are like on the same computer screen. So yeah, thanks for the conversation. And for those of you who are on the computer, I hope this was helpful, and please feel free to follow up with anybody if you have any questions. Bye, you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye, Miss Lori.
Take care. Hey, happy holidays.
Hey, same to you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.